Hello, dear friends. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Mukesh English. This is Mukesh Soni. In this video, I'm going to summarize Steve Jobs' famous speech at Stanford University that is called Stanford Commencement Speech delivered in 2005. In the speech, Steve Jobs' commencement address to Stanford University, class of 2005, the Apple CEO Steve Jobs provides his audience with personal experience in the rough periods he went through in his early years before founding Apple that helped him to succeed. With the use of his stories, Steve Jobs creates a character that prevails through obstacles and manages to achieve his goals, which inspires his audience to look up to him and show that failure is sometimes necessary to succeed. Let's go through his first story. There are three stories he has mentioned here. The first story is here, the connecting dots. In the first story, Steve Jobs talked about his adoption and his college life at Reed College. He started out talking about how he dropped out of college after 6 months, then stayed around as a drop in for about 18 months before he actually quit. He left college because his birth mother wanted to give him up for adoption so he could have parents that graduated college since his birth parents did not graduate. He also saw no value in going to an expensive school and he didn't know what he wanted to do. When he dropped out, Steve Jobs believed that it would all work out and be okay. He also thought it was the best decision he has ever made. 10 years later, when he was creating the first Macintosh computer, he put pictography in it and remembered that he took a calligraphy class when he dropped out of Reed College. The reason why his first story was called Connecting the Dots is because you cannot connect the dots looking forwards, you can only connect the dots looking backwards. I repeat, you cannot connect the dots looking forwards, you can only connect the dots looking backwards. Speaking about his second story, that's about love and loss. Steve Jobs was lucky because he found what he loved to do early in life. He started Apple in his parents' garage when he was 20 years old. After 10 years of hard work, Apple had grown from just the two persons in a garage into a $2 billion company with over 4,000 employees. They had just released their fine creation, the Macintosh, a year earlier, and he had just now turned 30 years. Steve Jobs was fired from Apple back in 1985 because the board believed he was no longer useful to the company. In fact, they believed he was being detrimental to the business. He says, our vision of the future began to diverge, and our board of directors sided with him. Someone so successful once reached rock bottom, yet managed to climb his way back up, and it inspires them to be like. Steve Jobs chose to talk about how he was fired from Apple and the company he had founded, because it reveals Steve Jobs' biggest failure. He had spent most of his adult life growing the company only to have it taken away, yet Steve Jobs pushed on and recovered it later on. This use of pathos strengthens the connection with his audience and shows how someone so successful once reached rock bottom yet managed to climb his way back up, and it inspires them to be like. It turned out that getting fired from Apple was the best thing that could have ever happened to him. The heaviest of being successful was replaced by the lightness of being a beginner again, less sure about everything. It freed him to enter one of the most creative periods of his life. That was the success, that was, we can say, the failure took him towards the success. During the next 5 years, he started a company named Next, another company named Pixar, and fell in love with an amazing woman who would become his wife. Pixar went on to create the world's first computer animated feature film, Toy Story, and is now the most successful animation studio in the world. In a remarkable turn of events, Apple bought Next And he returned to Apple, and the technology they developed at Next is at the heart of Apple's current renaissance. And Lauren and he had a wonderful family together. He was sure none of this would have happened if he was not fired from Apple. It was awful testing medicine for Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs says, in the words of Steve Jobs, sometimes life hits you in the head with a brick. Don't lose faith. I'm convinced that the only thing that kept me going was that I loved what I did. You have got to find what you love, and that is as true for your work as it is for your lovers. Your work is going to fill a large part of your life, and the only way to be truly satisfied is to do what you believe is great work. And the only way to do the great work is to love what you do. If you haven't found it yet, keep looking. Don't settle. As with all matters of the heart, you will know when you find it. And like any great relationship, it just gets better and better as the years roll on. So keep looking until you find it. Don't settle. Said by, quoted by Steve Jobs. The third story, reflections on death. Steve Jobs' third story is about death. He was diagnosed with cancer. The doctors told him this was almost certainly a type that is incurable. Later, he had surgery. There's a spelling error. Later, he had surgery and he was fine then. Steve Jobs says, in the words of Steve Jobs, no one wants to die, and yet death is the destination we all share. It is life's change agent. It clears out the old to make way for the new one. Right now, the new is you. But someday you will gradually become the old and be cleared away. Your time is limited. So don't waste it living someone else's life. When I was young, there was an amazing publication called the Whole Earth Catalog. On the back cover of their final issue, there were the words, stay hungry, stay foolish. And I have always wished that for myself. And now, as you graduate to begin anew, I wish that for you. Stay hungry, stay foolish. So, dear friends, what do we learn from Steve Jobs' famous speech or from the life of Steve Jobs? Stay hungry, stay foolish. Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living with the result of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice. And the most important, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become. Dear friends, thank you so much for watching this video. You can reach me at mukeshenglish@gmail.com. Please do subscribe the channel, click on the like button for more videos on literature, workbook, pronunciation, grammar, communication skills, presentation skills, interview skills. Stay in tune with Mukesh English. Thank you once again.